than just business news, we're news for business people.
Very good evening. You're watching Primetime. I'm Tamanna Inamdar.
And my name is Ayush Alavadi. Let's take a look at the headlines today. Moody's upgrades India for the first time in 14 years, says the impact of reforms will materialize in the coming years.
The Modi government welcomes the ratings upgrade. Finance Minister Arun Jaitley says the move is a belated recognition of the reforms undertaken by the government.
The upgrade cheer is short-lived with the Indian markets. The Nifty surrenders gains in the last hour to close 70 points higher. The rupee too cools off.
It's a strong listing by HDFC Life. The insurer lists at a 7% premium to its issue price of 290 rupees per share.
The BJP releases its first list of 70 candidates for the Gujarat polls. The list includes 5 Congress rebels and 17 contenders from the Patel community.
And of course, the big story this evening is the upgrade that India has received from Moody's. The ratings upgrade has been met by cheer by the markets. Corporates too have welcomed it, as has the government. Now, to speak more on that, I'm joined this evening by Union Minister Piyush Goyal. Thank you so much, sir, for speaking with us on Bloomberg Quint. The first question really is that this couldn't have perhaps come at a better time for the government when the narrative was moving towards a possible economic slowdown. There are elections coming up in Gujarat where the main opposition plank is demonetization and GST and the economy. So the timing is picture perfect.
Tamanna, frankly, this government has focused on public welfare and good governance through its 3.5 years. Be it our fight against corruption and black money, be it our effort to create a strong macroeconomic fundamental structure in the economy, be it our effort to formalize more and more of the informal economy, go digital. In every one of our programs for public welfare, we have focused on what is good for India, what is good for the people of India. I think endorsements came along the way at regular intervals. After all, the very fact that the BJP and its allies, which had only 6 state governments in 2014, today run 18 state governments, and by next year, by next month, possibly 19 state governments, has been the true endorsement of the people's trust, support and affection for the Prime Minister. And the BJP's work has been receiving this consistent support from the people. Obviously, in the last few days, with the ease of doing business showing a 30-point increase or 30 spot increase from 130 to 100, the World Competitiveness Index of the World Economic Forum showing quantum improvement in India's position, the improvements or the overall recognition through the Pew survey report about Prime Minister Modi's leadership being appreciated and liked by 9 out of 10 Indians across India, across all sections of society, and now the Moody's upgrade. All of this actually confirm what Prime Minister Modi, Finance Minister Mr. Jaitley and the government have consistently said, that we will focus our efforts on good governance in providing a good future to the people of India and create a strong economic backbone so that the country can progress for decades in the future.
Sure, sir. But I come back again to my question at the timing of all of these 3 things that you've mentioned, these 3 events, the ease of doing business, increase in ranking, the Pew survey, though the survey was done pre-GST, and now the Moody's upgrade. It comes at a time, very importantly, when demonetization and GST were being blamed, at least in the short term, for sort of giving a twin shock to the economy. The Moody survey talks about long-term implications. Do you think there is some sort of vindication there?
Tamanna, the fact of the matter is that our government has been focused on delivery, on performance, and on truly transforming the Indian way of thinking, the way of doing business, the way of running the government. I know we are a powerful nation. I know Prime Minister Modi's leadership today is accepted by the whole world. We see that in every international fora. Recently at the ASEAN and the extended ASEAN summit, you saw Prime Minister Modi being given the status of one of the tallest world leaders. I recognize that that is all there, but it still doesn't mean that we can dictate the timing of World Bank reports and Pew reports and Moody's upgrades. These are things that are decided by these institutions.
No, absolutely, absolutely. No doubt about that. It may be a happy coincidence for the BJP. But let me move on from that point to the whole process, because the government has been vocal in the past. Today, Finance Minister Arun Jaitley also said that this is a belated recognition. I had the opportunity to speak with Mr. Shaktikanta Das earlier, and he said that, he was part of the effort to explain to Moody's or convince Moody's that an upgrade was long overdue. Can you explain that process a bit? That was there a pitch that had to be made to explain that, come on now, look at these reforms that are being implemented?
Tamanna, we are all aware that all rating agencies are data driven, be it a business enterprise, be it even the rating of an NGO, or be it the rating of a government. It's all based on data. And when the last time the rating came out, we did feel, particularly on some of the comments that were made, that there seemed to be a less appreciation or understanding of the actual factual data related to the Indian economy. And I think every entity which is getting rated is always putting up before the rating agencies the most relevant and contemporary data, which I think the government also must have regularly updated Moody's with the most current contemporary data. And possibly at some point of time, they may not have been up to date. And it's the right of every government to engage with rating agencies, as I'm sure other governments in the past would have done.
Do you expect similar upgrades from other prominent rating agencies to follow?
Tamanna, this government, and particularly Prime Minister Modi, has always focused on the work that we are doing and the outcomes that that work can get us. All the other endorsements keep coming and going. It does not make us stray from our path or from the course we've set out to do. In fact, there are many occasions when a decision is being taken and may sound very politically unwise. One could easily have thought at the time of demonetization that there are 5 state elections around the corner. Let's defer it by a few months. But Prime Minister Modi has consistently held that if a decision is good for the country, if a decision is good for the people of India, now is the time to take it. Political expediencies have for long ruled economic policy in this country, and that's been the bane of Indian economics. I think here we have a decisive leader who's willing to literally bite the bullet, take bold decisions, do what is good for the people and the country, and he trusts that the people of India understand what is good for them and the country, and it's been vindicated by the people's trust and confidence that has been reposed again and again in Prime Minister Modi's leadership.
But Mr. Goyal, can you deny the negative impact that demonetization and GST have had, even though it may be in the short term? I mean, you have an All India Manufacturing Organization report saying that up to 25 to 30% job losses have taken place in the informal sector. GST has had teething troubles, compliance issues, and perhaps that's why there have been so many changes. So there is a challenge there, isn't it?
Well, in the first place, these were necessary for the good of the country. Demonetization gave a strong message that so far and no further, we need to get into the formal economy. Everybody needs to pay their taxes honestly. This cascading effect of taxes needs to end. And a wider tax base will be the forerunner to lower tax rates in the future. So I think both demonetization and GST have played an important role in the long-term benefit for the country, for the economy. The short-term impact was expected. We spoke about it. The Honorable Prime Minister is on record that there will be a transitional period, which the adjustment period, which we will have to go through. But sometimes in a nation's history, one has to take bold initiatives which will prepare us for decades of prosperity. We are not like the Congress that we have a global financial crisis and just within a year we let the fiscal deficit slide from 2.9% to 6.1% in 2008. And look at the big cost the nation paid for 5 or 6 years after that. That short and myopic thinking and that short-term gain or benefit that they sought to get and project a good image, maybe to win one election, cost this nation 4 or 5 years of development and growth. I think this government has focused itself on what is good for the nation. We are willing to take this transitory setback, but I'm sure this, the quarter that is going to be reported now and the quarters in the future, you'll see, as has been Moody's projection, a consistent improvement in economic growth. All other macroeconomic parameters are very strong. Inflation under control, deficits lowering quarter on quarter.
Since you brought
in
up
every
fiscal
respect,
deficit,
foreign
sir.
exchange reserves, Indian rupee.
Sure, sir. Since you brought up fiscal deficit, Moody's has also said that a material deterioration in fiscal metrics and the outlook for general government fiscal consolidation would put negative pressure on the rating. Does it put more pressure on your government to keep to that path of fiscal discipline and stick to the 3.2 figure?
No, but we don't need Moody's or anybody else to tell us that. We are ourselves committed to it. We brought the new FRBM Act and we have put on upon ourselves the restrictions of fiscal prudence. So it's not something we need somebody else to come and tell us to do. It's what we believe in. What Prime Minister Modi and Finance Minister Jaitley have repeatedly said, that we stand committed to our fiscal consolidation path. There have been some speculation by media or some outsiders, but government has not for once suggested that we are looking at any slippages.
Okay, I'll round off with just one last political question, and I'm going to try and ask this question once more. All of these developments, including Moody's, has happened on the eve of the Gujarat election, where the opposition party has made economy its main election plank. It happens rarely in a state election where the state of the economy is the key plank. In that context, is this a shot in the arm and makes you more confident about Gujarat?
Well, I think the people of Gujarat have already made up their mind. I'm very sure that given the work that the BJP and Prime Minister Modi himself have done for the welfare of the people of Gujarat over the last 22 years, given the fact that Gujarat has seen a golden era of development and prosperity for its people over the last 22 years, given the fact that today Prime Minister Modi from Gujarat is giving the country a golden era of development, Mr. Amit Shah, national president, has strengthened the party to make it the world's largest political party, now ruling 18 states in India and the center. To my mind, the people of Gujarat have made up their mind. They stand behind Mr. Modi, they trust Prime Minister Modi, they trust Amit Shah, they are confident that Vijay Rupani and Nitin Bhai Patel are going to give them a good government. We are poised for a stupendous victory in Gujarat.
150 seats, sir?
Reports such as the Moody's we are looking at 150 seats, and to my mind, we'll get it.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much for speaking with us. Union Minister Piyush Goyal there speaking on the Moody's ratings. And interestingly, Ayush, the political connection to it, because this is a time when economy and politics have converged like never before. That's something we're speaking on Primetime debate tonight as well, of how much of a boost will this ratings upgrade give the Modi government, and how much has it rocked the boat for the opposition, which has made economy its main plank.
All right, moving on, let's get you another big voice from the government. Finance Minister Arun Jaitley said Moody's upgrade is a belated recognition of reforms in India. Jaitley added that the endorsement from Moody's strengthens the government's resolve to continue on the path of reforms.
It is a recognition and an endorsement of the reform process which has gone on in India, particularly in the last 3 to 4 years, where a number of structural reforms have taken place, which have placed India on a path of a high trajectory growth. It's also a recognition of the fact that India continues to follow a path of fiscal prudence that has brought stability to the Indian economy itself.
Economy Affairs Secretary Subhash Chandra Garg shrugged off concerns about India's high debt to GDP ratio that Moody's had highlighted, saying that India's debt levels were lower than many of the developed economies. Garg added that efforts to lower debt will yield results in the medium term.
FRBM committee suggested a good level of general government debt at 60%. So if you take that as the goal, then 69 to 60 might take a few years to achieve. And that would be requiring that you continue on the path which the government has so consistently maintained, that you reduce your fiscal deficits on a consistent basis. So it will be a little longer journey over a period of time when you can achieve more sustainable, more sort of gradually lower levels of debt.
Well, bankers too have lauded the ratings upgrade and consider it a big positive for the country and the economy. Listen in.
The government's fiscal prudence itself, it gets a thumbs up, apart from the far-reaching reforms which we have seen in the banking sector, the recapitalization program, the adoption of insolvency and bankruptcy code, the GST reforms. All these, they get a thumbs up from the international investors.
I think this is also a huge positive for the Indian government and the Indian corporates, because it reduces the borrowing costs for the government. It also leads to lower credit risk premiums for the corporates, which leads to cheaper cost of capital for the corporates. This move, I think, will also help in improving the availability and access to capital overseas for the Indian companies, because even new long-term investors such as pension funds, etc., can now start investing in Indian bonds.
I think it's taken a long time for Moody's to give India an upgrade in its rating. I've always felt that India's rating was far below what it should be, particularly during the last 2-3 years, the number of reforms the government has undertaken. It's a little too late. We should have got it much earlier.
Great news for India that India is finally getting recognized in terms of being a stable economy, and it's a long-term positive. But India has to do a lot more to get up the curve.
It's also the external world validating the strategies that the country has followed, whether we look at it in terms of the movement up on the ease of doing business index or this rating upgrade. It's reflecting that the structural reforms that we have gone through, while they may on occasion have created some short-term pain, they actually leave the country in a very strong position for growth in the future.
But just how big a boost is this for the government and the economy? Let's get a view in from Principal Economic Advisor Sanjeev Sanyal, who we spoke to earlier in the day.
There was no real immediate implication in that sense, other than maybe a improvement in investor sentiment. Perhaps in the longer run, the cost of capital to our industry will decline a lot. But it's a good feedback that we are in the right direction. So I think we are quite pleased with it. It's an endorsement more than anything else. But yes, of course, in the long run, as you said, it does impact cost of capital, investment sentiment, and so on.
Now, the Indian markets responded with gusto to the upgrade, but the euphoria was short-lived. The Nifty rallied over 100 points in early trade before cooling off and closing 70 points higher. Cipla and HDFC were the top gainers, while Infosys and TCS were the top losers.
The picture was no different in the currency markets. The rupee spiked in early trade, rising to the highest level in 8 months before closing lower. So what will the implication be of this ratings upgrade for Indian markets? Kotak Asset Management's Nilesh Shah says that the upgrade will facilitate the entry of more foreign investors, including pension funds.
The broad range of pension funds will start investing in India or start looking at India. Second, in the global market, as rating upgrade happens and you have started seeing corporate rating also getting changed, their borrowing cost, the spread over US Treasury will start cutting down. That reduces their borrowing cost. Third, as the rating upgrade happens, many of the foreign banks as well as foreign institutions, their exposure limit gets revised. They will be able to take higher exposure on India, whether it's sovereign, whether it's public sector, whether it's corporate. That could be a matter of debate. But their overall allocation to India will get increased because of this upgrade.
Now, veteran investor Rakesh Jhunjhunwala said the ratings upgrade was a fitting reply to Narendra Modi's critics.
Well, my thought is the endorsement of the policies that the government has followed in the last 3 years and a recognition of the great change that India is going through, and they are looking at it positively. And it's a fitting answer to the critics of the Modi government. So Modi has a track record of being a fiscally responsible person. Right? He's not a one who will spend himself to inflation. So seeing his track record and seeing this government's track record, they are not going to let the fiscal deficit go up beyond a point. And the recommendation that if any structural change is taking place, we have to bear a higher deficit for a certain period of time.
Now, earlier in the day, my colleague Tamanna also caught up with former Economic Affairs Secretary Shaktikanta Das, who during his time in North Block was very vocal about how ratings agencies have been ignoring India's reform drive. Tamanna started by asking him what he made of this big ratings bump up, given the implications that demonetization and GST have had on the economy.
No, this is definitely a clear recognition of the kind of reforms which India has undertaken over the last 3.5 years. Now, whether it is GST or demonetization or liberalization of FDI or the Aadhaar-backed direct benefit transfer with regard to subsidies or the introduction of the bankruptcy and insolvency code. Now, the list is very long. It's certainly a recognition of all that. And we had been interacting, I had been personally interacting with the Moody's, and my colleagues and we were interacting. And we had pointed out to them that, look, the ground reality is there is a lot of changes taking place. There's a lot of governance reforms also happening, and the rating agencies need to recognize that. But Moody's had their own point of view. Their point of view was that they would like the reforms to take, more roots, deeper roots. And we had our point of view, wherein we had said that the reforms are very robust. And the fact that now Moody's have recognized, it is certainly a clear endorsement of the reforms which India has undertaken.
Mr. Das, since you have explained that you also played an active role in sort of convincing Moody's to do what they should have, in your view, done a long time ago, what do you think has led to this move? What has effectively convinced Moody's to change that rating?
You see, it is not an individual's effort. I think it's the effort of the entire government. All departments, all ministries of government have done their bit. For example, the ease of, the improvement in the ease of doing business. It naturally is an outcome of the contribution made by so many ministries across various sectors. So similarly here also, the the reforms, when we talk about, reforms were undertaken by various ministries. And now perhaps Moody's are more than satisfied that reforms in India are here to stay, and reforms in India will sustain over a period of time, and the impact of the reforms are going to be long term. For instance, they have pointed out that the combined outcome, the combined effect of demonetization and GST has been a move towards formalization of the Indian economy. There is a recognition that the fiscal parameters are also very robust. So it is an overall recognition. They are somewhat behind the curve, and but it is good that finally it has been recognized by the Moody's.
What do you see as the immediate impact of this? Of course, we will get better terms in our loans, our international borrowings and all of that. But it has also been pointed out that the rupee will strengthen. That could hurt exports more, and exports are already in a fragile space. Do you agree with that theory?
You see, with regard to the overall impact, it will certainly, it will definitely sort of, the message to the, the message to the investors across the world and the message to domestic investors is that India is in the right direction. The reforms are in the right direction. GST related problems, issues have been more or less resolved. The country is on the path of economic reforms which are taking deeper roots. So far as government is concerned, I am sure this will motivate the government further to go faster on the path of economic reforms and other policy initiatives which government has been taking. So net, I would see that it should augur well for the business climate and investment climate in India. Now with regard to the rupee, now the strength of the rupee, I mean, it is hovering today around, let's say, 65 or so. And you see, exports, the fact that the exports are doing well in certain segments and not doing well in certain segments, there are multiplicity of factors. It's a complex, it's a complex mix of reasons. The strength or the weakness of rupee is one of the factors in, in that mix of factors. So therefore, if the rupee becomes stronger, as you are pointing out, I am sure as the monetary policy authority, Reserve Bank will take necessary measures to see that the rupee is at the correct level. Although the Reserve Bank, as far as I know, doesn't have any predetermined idea that the rupee should be at such and such level. But then central banks across the world do play a role in keeping the currency at a level which makes the economy competitive. And I'm sure the Reserve Bank of India will do whatever is necessary in this regard.
Does it also increase our challenges, sir, on staying on the path of fiscal consolidation and ensuring that there are no slippages in the 3.2% fiscal deficit target?
See, I'll tell 2 points. First point is that the 3.2% target for the current year. Current year, a lot depends on the kind of revenues that GST will bring in for the government. There is some uncertainty there, but with resolution of most of the issues involved, I think GST revenues will become stable. So everything depends on the GST revenues. Even if there is a marginal shortfall in GST revenues, I am sure the government will have a fallback option to make it up. And if the GST revenue shortfall is huge, then of course the story may be slightly different. But then it will be too early, it will be too sort of premature and too presumptuous on my part to rush to a conclusion. Having said that, the second point I would like to make is that the target of 3% fiscal deficit next year is very much doable. By next year, the GST revenues would have stabilized. The government will be in a better position to have a clearer picture of GST revenues, and with the kind of the kind of expenditure requirements that we have. Taking all these factors into account, I think next year 3.2% will definitely be doable. And whether it's a pressure on the government is not the issue. I think government on its own has adopted a path of fiscal prudence, and there is no reason why the government will deviate from it.
Just one last question, Mr. Das. In terms of the reforms process, and that process has been recognized in a sense by Moody's today, what are the next challenges or the next priorities you see for the government?
You see, two aspects. One is that the remaining reform agenda, and of course, remember, reform agenda is always ever growing, because as you move in terms of time, there will be newer challenges, there will be newer possibilities, there are newer policy options. One is to continue on the path of economic and structural reforms. Second point is to continue to adhere to the path of fiscal prudence. The third point is that the large number of impactful policy decisions which government has taken, whether it is the completion of the PMGSY, that is the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, that is the rural roads program ahead of time, or rural electrification, or whether it it is with regard to implementation of various other infrastructure projects, the railway projects, or the Bharatmala project. I think all those targets, the implementation will have to stick to their to the targeted timelines, and ensure that the implementation continues to be qualitatively good and continues to maintain to the various milestones in terms of time.
All right, thank you so much for speaking with us, Mr. Shaktikanta Das. Now up next, how much of a boost will this rating upgrade give the Modi government and the BJP actually in the race to Gujarat? Has it sort of derailed the entire opposition plank, which was focused on the economy? We're talking about that next on Primetime Debate. I'm speaking with Shankar Iyer, Praveen Chakravarti and A.K. Bhattacharya, three top editors, on what they think the political impact is of the Moody's upgrade. That's coming up next.
That sounds like an interesting chat. So all of you watching, thanks so much for watching this show, and stay tuned to Bloomberg Quint for Primetime Debate.